Fish and Wildlife Commission. I want to welcome everyone to day 2 of our December meeting. This is the full commission meeting. And so to get things started right, I'll ask Chaplain Stroud to lead us in the invocation and the pledge.
Father, thank you so much for the day. Lord, we just want to take just a second here to thank you so much for blessing this country and us for George Bush. The week has been amazing for us as Americans to watch the process of America. And Father, thank you for America. Lord, bless us as a commission to look at President Bush as an inspiration for public service and for character and for expertise and for vision. And Father, thank you so much for this TWRA and who they are and what they serve, how they serve, their loyalty and their amazing knowledge and how they apply it. Father, let us have these great meetings and let us have vision and bless us with the things that we need to do, the tools that we need to be great. And Father, I pray that we are going to be great in your eyes. Now I ask all these things in your name. Amen. Amen. Let me turn around. Ready to go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, James. And once again, you hit the nail on the head, so thank you for your comments, and I totally agree. So, as our usual protocol, we don't have, I don't know if there's much discussion today. It's a pretty quick meeting, but if anybody would like to make a comment or ask a question, please step to the microphone, state your name, who you represent, if you represent an organization, and direct any comments or questions to me or whoever, whatever chairman is in whatever committee that's open at that time. And are there any other, well, let's go with a roll call now, please. Yeah.
Chad Baker, Angie Box, here. Bill Cox,
Here.
Dennis Gardner,
Here.
Connie King,
here.
Tony Sanders,
Here.
James Stroud,
Here.
Bill Swan,
Here.
Kent Woods,
Here.
Jamie Woodson,
Here.
Brian McLaren,
Here.
Kurt Holbert,
Here.
Jeff Cook.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Danette. We all received the minutes prior to the meeting, and unless we want to read those, does anyone make a motion to approve? A motion from Commissioner Gardner, second from Commissioner McLaren. So those are approved. Commissioner Box, do you have your phone turned off this morning?
Let me check just a second.
Okay, thank you. If everyone just check their phones.
And my microphone's turned off. So
Perfect.
everything's ready to go.
Thank you. We're good. And any other announcements from? Yeah, all in favor. Yeah.
All in favor?
Yeah. So any announcements from the commission?
Just want to remind everybody today is Pearl Harbor Day. I don't know if James said that when he was talking, but having watched the week with President Bush and having a grandfather that got into the war because of Pearl Harbor Day, so it dawned on me this morning this was today. So that's all.
Thank you for the reminder. It's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
My father was a captain with the 91st Field Artillery, or 191st Field Artillery out of Tennessee, and served under Patton, was killed in France when I was 3 months old.
Yeah. Well, appreciate your family's service and sacrifice. Sorry, Commissioner King? No.
I was clarifying what Commissioner Swan said.
Any other comments from the commission? Assistant Director Wilson, any comments? So we'll recognize you for the next part of the meeting.
Thank you, Chairman Cook, and good morning, Commissioners. We have some special guests today that we'd like to recognize. In fact, they're practically our only guests. We have the National Wild Turkey Federation. They are sponsors, they are partners that we have had for many years, and they've been a huge help in providing us some funding for projects mostly habitat related. But I want to recognize them today. But first, before I do that, I want to show a few slides of some of the examples of things that they have participated with us and help us get accomplished. And hopefully it'll show up on the screen. There it is. So first of all, as you know, we've probably in the second year, I think, of the Turkey Research Project with the University of Tennessee, and the National Wild Turkey Federation has provided funds to actually expand the project from its original scope. So we should hear more about that, the results of that, in just a few more years. It's a very important research project going on now with the University of Tennessee. Habitat improvement on the North Cumberland Wildlife Management Area. Many of you were on the North Cumberland at the previous commission meeting when we took a tour of various places up there and saw some of the things that are being done. A lot of that work, a lot of that habitat improvement is as a result of funding that we've received from the National Wild Turkey Federation. Even though this benefits, I guess a lot of people think it just benefits elk, it also benefits all wildlife, including turkeys and elk and deer. So you've heard about the aerial herbicide spraying at North Cumberland. I believe Joe Elkins, the area manager up there, and Brad Miller talked about what they've been doing, what they've been able to do with that aerial herbicide spraying and creating excellent habitat. Prescribed fire burning is something that we do a lot on our WMAs, or wildlife management areas, and this is just an example of one at the North Cumberland and another one at the North Cumberland of things. It looks terrible, as you know, right now, but once it starts raining and spring comes around, stuff grows, and it's really good for wildlife. And as you see, we recognize on the sign here the conservation partner with the National Wild Turkey Federation. I don't know if you see that or not, but if you don't, let's see if I can do this. Right there, and there. So I can also highlight it, but I think everybody can read it okay. And then food plot enhancement at Shelby Forest Wildlife Management Area. They've contributed funds to do habitat projects all across the state, and of course Shelby Forest is in the extreme western part of our state, just Shelby County, and we've also got funding for them to assist with food plots at John Tully Wildlife Management Area, which is just north of the Shelby Forest. The National Wild Turkey Federation to go towards habitat improvement projects there. This is actually a rotary boom mower attachment for South Cherokee Wildlife Management Area. They've contributed funds to go towards that, and they contribute funds to the South Cherokee as well, which is the U.S. Forest Service, but they have partnered there, and those, even though that's not our agency, that's still in Tennessee, so they benefit our hunters and benefit the wildlife in Tennessee by doing that as well. And Director Carter sent me this picture, wanted me to include this. What does that say about our director? But actually, he wanted to point out the guy next to him is Secretary of Agriculture, Sonny Perdue, and how the importance of things that are going on there in South Cherokee, and they recognize the National Wild Turkey Federation as well. Just a kind of overview, all the map showing the stars are some of the examples of projects that we have had in the past with the National Wild Turkey Federation. And I should mention the Tennessee chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation has been very much involved. So I wanted to recognize a couple of people that are here, and then they're going to recognize others that are here. Ross Melinchuk is the Conservation Director for the National Wild Turkey Federation. You may know Ross from years past. He was very much involved with Ducks Unlimited for quite a while, and then he was a Deputy Director for the state of Texas for Texas Parks and Wildlife for about almost 10 years, I think, Ross. And he's fairly new at this one. You said maybe not quite 10 months yet with the National Wild Turkey Federation. And Sam Mars is the former state director for the Tennessee chapter, I believe, as well as the chairman of the board for the National Wild Turkey Federation, and he is currently a board member on the National Wild Turkey Federation. He lives in Claiborne County, Tennessee. So if I would, I'd like to get those two up. But we have a resolution that I'd like to read also from the commission and the agency to the National Wild Turkey Federation. I will read that with them, and then we'll recognize the rest after I read that. That's okay. One other thing I want to mention that Shane Hall, y'all know who Shane Hall is? He was a handicapped individual that was actually employed by the National Wild Turkey Federation by funding that we provided and they provided to go forward with what former Commissioner Harold Cannon helped get started, was called the Moment of Freedom, in which they paid for and developed various hunting blinds, whether it's duck hunting or deer hunting or turkey hunting, and then they've rolled off into the fishing realm with a fishing pier that they're access area for handicapped individuals at Tellico River, where they'll be able to fish for trout. And that's probably about 50% complete. And it'll be a dedication of that in the spring. But that's just want to recognize Shane. Of course, he passed away a year or two ago, and he was employed by the National Wild Turkey Federation too. So, Ross, if you want to come up, and I'll read the resolution. You stand up here right beside me if you want to. You and Sam. Just in case you don't know, this is Ross, and this is Sam.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, get up here. So, whereas the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency and the Tennessee chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation have held a strong partnership through the years, whereas I'm gonna shorten instead of saying National Wild Turkey Federation, say NWTF. So whereas the NWTF has played an integral role in helping Tennessee and other states restore the wild turkey population, whereas during the past 10 years, the NWTF has contributed more than $192,000 for TWRA projects, and whereas NWTF contributions have increased TWRA's ability to prescribe fire, arguably TWRA's best habitat management tool, whereas the TWRF contributions aided in the purchase of 14,769 acres of huntable land on Skinner Mountain Wildlife Management Area, and whereas the NWTF provides wildlife seed annually for use on multiple wildlife management areas, whereas the NWTF is providing valuable assistance in the 2016 through 2021 University of Tennessee Knoxville Wild Turkey Research Project, and whereas NWTF has supported projects on John Tully WMA on an annual basis for more than a decade, and whereas the NWTF supported South Cherokee and Tellico Lake Wildlife Management Areas from 2015 through 2018, including the United States Forest Service Good Neighbor Agreement projects, whereas NWTF supported North Cumberland Wildlife Management Area shortleaf oak restoration and woodland savanna restoration, and whereas the NWTF supported projects on multiple TWRA wildlife management areas, bolstering the Save the Habitat, Save the Hunt initiative of the National Wild Turkey Federation, and whereas the NWTF's JAKES program has played a pivotal role in recruitment, retention, and reactivation, otherwise known as R3, efforts, and continually ranks among the top 3 events in the country. And whereas the state of Tennessee has the honor of being home to the annual National Wild Turkey Federation National Convention, therefore, the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission and the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency do jointly proclaim sincere appreciation for the close bond and working relationship with the Tennessee chapter of the NWTF, its many members and parent organization in furthering our mutual goals for the wild turkey and solid wildlife management principles in general, and in testimony whereof the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission meeting in regular session in Nashville, Tennessee, Friday, December 7th, 2018, have caused to be affixed the Great Seal of the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. So, thank you. That's a lot.
Well, thank you, Bobby, for those great words, and you've really just put a point on the tremendous partnership that we enjoy with TWRA. All of this can't be done by any one agency or one individual, and we're just delighted to be here today to receive this recognition, but it's humbling because, as I say, it's a partnership. It takes a lot of people, a lot of resources, and great communication and partnership work together, and you all epitomize what partnership really means to NWTF. So thank you for all you do. You've heard and saw some of the results of that work. We're just getting started. There's lots more to be done. And I want to introduce some individuals who are here today that really are the heart and soul, the blood, sweat, and tears really that goes into making Tennessee chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation what it is. And I might add, the Tennessee state chapter is the #1 chapter in the entire nation because of some of the individuals that are here and many of the 10,000 members that we have in the state of Tennessee. So that is a pretty high watermark to meet, and I can tell you that they're very proud of what we do. And again, the partnership with TWRA helps make that happen. You've met Sam Mars. He was introduced. Sam is our past Tennessee state chapter president, but he's also been the president and the chairman of the board of our national board with NWTF. He's currently on the board, and he really provides great direction and leadership for us. Joe Schultz, who's our state chapter president, couldn't be here today. His mother is gravely ill, but I know he would love to have been here today too. But we do have 3 members of the board with us, and I'll get them to just stand when I call their name. Keith Hickman. Keith is the past president of the Tennessee chapter. Mike Santel, who's a current board member on this Tennessee state chapter, and Mark Darnell, who is our current vice president of the Tennessee chapter, which means he'll step up to be president here after Joe is done. And again, we have some great staff here who support the volunteers at all levels, and we have folks here from really all 3 departments of TWRA here today. Mr. Tim Yates, Mr. Mark Jackson, and Mr. Charlie Tollett are all regional directors across Tennessee. So they work with our volunteers. They do all of the outreach events that we host, and are really the backbone for the volunteers when they need assistance, and keep them organized and help provide the direction and support they need. Mr. Derek Alkire is here. Derek is our Director of Conservation Operations for the entire Southeast, which includes Tennessee. And so those are some of the folks. Oh, Jeff Pratt. Jeff, finally found it, right? Yeah. You've been driving around this property all morning. Glad to have you. Jeff is our Director of Development with NWTF. So I want to thank all of those gentlemen for what they do. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here and be recognized. We really, I'm all smiles just because, as you said, you've heard my history, but I've now come to work with what I think is the greatest conservation organization in the country, and look forward to doing more and better with TWRA. And Sam, would you like to say anything?
You've said it all.
I've said it all? Okay, thank you again. Can we get a photo or something?
And I'd like to speak on...
Got room to get everybody in the photo?
And Ross and Sam, I'd like to speak on behalf of the commission to say that, this is just a smattering of even though these are huge projects that we saw this morning, I know that's just a smattering of what you do with us and for us, and through decades you've been doing this. So we greatly appreciate this relationship and know it'll continue to get stronger in the future. So thank you for all you do.
See, they're trying to hide behind the Christmas decorations.
Well, they were in front of Kurt yesterday. He kind of brought them. You should be able to.
They're trying to write now for you.
Hold on, we have my watch.
I want you to know that I took out
Really? Yesterday, so I can imagine how that. Hey, he's got some of those. Look at that. Look. Ready? 1,
gave in is for Lane. And I have notified her.
So just to follow up on something we talked about yesterday, Commissioner Stroud asked about hunting on whether cities could limit hunting. And so Tracy Boyers, our legal counsel, has given me some great information here. And as she explained to me, that it's a constitutional right in Tennessee to hunt. So that pretty much covers a lot of ground. And we have three attorneys general opinions saying that that is correct. And also the issue of hunting close to a residence. You know, the law is you have to be 100 yards away from a structure, a dwelling, a business, but that's only on public land. So on private land, that does not hold. I thought it was all land myself, but it's only on public land.
So
And
it's
also, and the other issue is that we have the right, we are given through the authority to set the seasons, and of course, all of that pertains to seasons as well. You have to follow the seasons no matter where you're hunting.
So it's true?
It's true.
So is it 100 yards or 100 feet? And to clarify, a municipality or county cannot pass a law that prevents a person from legally hunting by passing a law that you cannot shoot in their city limits.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, there is a little, let's see, I was talking to, was it Darren or Chris? Little caveat that, go ahead and say, I'll get it wrong, so tell me.
Tracy, to certainly keep me honest, the municipality can pass whatever law they want. This would provide a defense to the prosecution under that law. But it only applies in situations where you're lawfully hunting. In the case of a depredation permit, or if you were a landowner that was trying to handle a small game problem that was causing damage to your property, wouldn't necessarily have a defense if you discharged a firearm in violation of a municipal ordinance in that situation. But certainly if it's an open hunting season, you are lawfully hunting, that creates a defense to any prosecution under a firearm ban or city ordinance.
They could,
Might be at some legal fees, right?
You could be.
but they could also charge you with reckless endangerment or negligence if you were acting
Certainly,
shooting too close to a subdivision or whatever.
certainly.
But as Tracy said, even though they have an ordinance that says you cannot discharge a firearm within this municipality, this would be your legal argument to,
Because they can't make something that's legal under state law illegal in a city by ordinance.
So it takes precedence over.
It's a state law. But
so
if
the
you-
state law takes precedence over the municipality. Great, well, thank you very much.
So is it 100 feet or 100 yards?
Yards.
100 yards, okay.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to recognize Chairman Woodson for the Fisheries meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recognize Assistant Chief of Fisheries Jason Henegar to give us a preview of the Fish Dealer Rule 1660-1-.26, apparently. Very specific.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Commission, for allowing me to to come and give this presentation today. Like like the chairman said, this is a rule preview for a rule change to Rule 1660-1-26. This rule regulates the fish farming, catch-out operations, and bait dealers within the state, and also non-resident that want to do business in the state of Tennessee. Okay, this rule promulgates from TCA Code 70-2-221 for fish dealers' license requirements, fees, and penalties. It also gives the Commission the authority to promulgate rules and regulations to guide the operation of these businesses. This license is simply sold through our branch system unless it is for a species that is not approved by the current rule. There is some, I guess, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Why do we want to change this rule now? This rule was originally the code and rule were originally filed in 1994 and then revised in 2001. And since then, we've seen a lot of changes in aquaculture as well as in fisheries management within our state. We've been introduced to a lot of different A&S species since then, and there's a lot more threat of disease and things to our wildlife within the state. One of our big concerns right now is with the species allowed under the current rule. We have a definition of native wildlife that states that if a species naturally occurs within the geographic boundaries of Tennessee and whose presence is a result of those species' natural biology, then it is a native species. It does not take into account any of the historic occurrences of species within the state. So, for instance, Alabama spotted bass historically did not occur in the state of Tennessee. It is not an A&S species. It's not listed as a Class 5 species that is prohibited in the state. And we currently have a naturally reproducing population of Alabama spotted bass in Parksville Reservoir and parts of the Tennessee River. We have seen that Alabama spotted bass have had detrimental effects on smallmouth bass in both Georgia and North Carolina. They could have that same effect on smallmouth in the state of Tennessee. Under the current rule, these fish could be considered native species and used in the aquaculture trade and then as well. So another reason, of course, is source of A&S species and disease. Currently, we have found whirling disease occurring in the state of Tennessee and also North Carolina. North Carolina is one of the #1 producers of trout in the U.S. It actually sets #2. And brook trout is a big concern for our state, native populations of brook trout. There is some brook trout being produced in North Carolina by some fish farms, and also they have found gill lice that is specific to brook trout in North Carolina. In order to try to prevent that spread of disease into our state, I'll later mention that in fish farming we want to take brook trout out of the approved species. So the changes that we want to make, proposed changes, like I said, currently the 1660 rule, it allows all non-game native species, all native game species for stocking into private waters, all species of trout and salmon, striped bass, and white bass hybrids to be used in fish farming. We would like to go away from these allowances and go to a list of species that we've vetted through our fisheries biologists across the state, and that we have contacted some of the fish dealers that we deal with through the catfish stockings in our spring kids fish stockings. We've contacted some of them to review this list and really hasn't seen any objection so far to this species list. But we also have, along with this species list, we have the caveat that other species can be approved for use in fish farming by the director with a letter of approval. Going on to the catch-out operations, we would also like to move away from the list that we currently have of all native catfish species, all trout species, all salmon, common carp, buffalo, and other legally obtained non-game species. And we would like to go to the list that you see here with the exception. Both lists we remove from the trout species the brook trout in order to protect our native stocks of brook trout. We also want to go to a U.S. Fish and Wildlife certified grass carp. This process screens all the fish that, all the grass carp at a fish dealer. It's an agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The fish dealer actually screens the fish that they're looking to sell, and then U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service sends a representative in, and they, of those screened fish, they take a random sample of 120 fish, and if any of those fish come back to not be certified triploid, that whole batch is then denied and has to be rescreened. So it does test each individual fish and then certifies a random sample of those fish, where some of the triploid certifications do not screen all fish. They just work off that random sample.
Would you define catch-out operation?
Catch-out operation is it's a facility that obtains reared fish or legally caught commercial fish and stocks ponds for the public to come and fish for a fee and take those fish or take those the fillets, the meat of those fish at a charge for the cost per pound usually. It's pay lakes, yes. And in this rule, in statute, it defines catch-out facilities. They can only obtain their fish through reared fish, which means fish farms, or through commercial fishing. And we recently made changes to the live haul of catfish in the commercial fishing regulations that would prevent large catfish being taken and used in pay lake catch-out operations.
You have to have a license to fish the pay lake.
You do not have to have a license at a pay lake.
Hey, the triploid that you're screening the grass carp for, can you explain what the screening is actually doing? I don't understand that.
It's actually looking at the genetics of the fish. A diploid grass carp can naturally reproduce. They force that genetic material to be changed to have 3 sets of genetic chromosomes, and they do that through either heat or pressure, hydraulic pressure on the eggs once they're fertilized. While that fertilization is taking place, they can pressurize those eggs or heat those eggs and change that genetic material. Yes. And this process allows for that 95 to 100% sterility. Okay. Bait dealers, they are also listed under this fish dealer license. We would like to move, we currently have this list of species in our bait proclamation. It truly needs to be moved to rule instead of in the proclamation as list of species, and this mirrors what we currently have in our bait proclamation. Right now, the current rule simply reads approved bait fish and other aquatic life for sale or the selling of bait fish and other aquatic life, whether acquired from the wild or otherwise legally obtained. So we would like to go to this list of species so it's a lot clearer to the bait dealer and also customers of what they can and can't have. We also added to the bait dealer section of this the need for an invoice for trout, because trout is a sport fish that we also allow to be bought as bait from fish farming facilities. We have some requirements on the size of trout that you can have and the limit of trout. We simply want to move that invoice requirement into the rule instead of proclamation there as well. So, one other change that we had was to the inspection process for these operations, these businesses. And currently, the reporting requirements was a little inconsistent. We had it listed under fish farm and catch out, but we didn't have anything listed under bait. It was in proclamation. The requirements of what records needed to be kept was inconsistent also in the rule, and we want to clear that up for each type of business, and also we wanted to clear up what TWRA's authority actually was. In the original rule, it said that TWRA representatives could check records at any time. In the new rule, we want to clarify that the director or officers or employees of the agency can inspect facilities and records during normal business hours, and also some of the authorities we have for diseased and diseased fish that we find, any shipments of diseased fish that we find, we also clearly state in the new rule what is required on those records and those invoices, being the name of the facility, the license number of the facility, date of purchase, number of fish purchased. It's clearly put in there as a list instead of just quickly went over in paragraph form. So I know that was really fast, but with that, I'll take any questions.
I've got a question, and I'm not sure whether you could answer it or not. Bobby may know the history on it. I don't know of anything else in the state that hunts or fishes that doesn't require a license. What is the history on pay lakes, and why don't you have to have a license to fish? If you go to a hunting preserve, I believe you have to have a license.
Commissioner Cox, that even precedes me, but that's a long time ago. I think the owner of the pond has to have a license, and that's supposed to cover everybody that fishes in it, because it's their private pond, and they stock it with fish they purchase, and so I feel like it's not a public body of water, and it's
but I've got a private lake, and I buy fish and stock it.
Yes, you can.
And whether I allow people to, if I allow people to fish, they have to have a fishing license.
Correct.
Start charging them.
So what's the difference?
Well, there is a license that covers it. The catch-out permit covers that.
What's the price of that license?
$62 for resident.
Thank you.
And then you don't have to have a license if he has that license.
Frank.
Frank's gonna, Frank.
I can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah.
Frank Fiss, Chief of Fisheries. You would be limited to those species that are on that list, though. For example, you couldn't open up a bass pond for fishing. It's only the catfish and the other species that Jason listed. So it's a fairly specific type of fishery. It's, easy fish that are commonly reared or typically used, rainbow trout and catfish.
The lowly catfish put on the back of the bus again. It's not about the fish. I'm questioning the competition for free fishing and not buying a license for the public and our revenue. And I just don't, $62 and allow thousands of people or hundreds of people to fish every year. I'm not sure how that squares. So
So what lake, which one is that apply to the catch out, the fish that are on the catch out list?
I can speak a little bit to that. The license was mentioned in statute. When a fish dealer buys a license, if they have a catch-out facility, the clients of that catch-out facility does not need a license, and that's mentioned in statute. That 70-2-226.
Well, not to belabor, Mr. Chairman, I think that needs to be discussed further. They're taking a state resource that commercial fishermen are catching, and they're selling to this lake, and they're letting people fish without a license. And that just doesn't seem quite right now. And it may be 50 years ago, but our situation, our financial situation is not the same as it was 50 years ago. So I would suggest that that might be fodder for discussion at some point.
Chairman Cook?
Bobby, could you just give us I know this was kind of preliminary, but could you give us the history of that? And maybe there's more to this than we understand. So maybe the next meeting we could revisit this and get more details. Does that sound good? Commissioner Cox? Chairman Woodson?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Not a private property.
Yes, sir.
I have just out of curiosity, are people actually salmon farming in Tennessee? Is there salmon farming?
Not that we're aware of, but that is a commonly used species in fish culture, and we see no reason to keep them from doing that if they go to the extent of raising those fish. So. Frank?
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. You said not that you're aware of. I was just wondering if, do these fish farming operations, don't they have to be licensed as well?
They do. It's under this fish dealer's license. It's a combined license for those three businesses. So it's very difficult for us to know exactly what these businesses are doing. They buy that one license, and then they can do any of those three businesses. And some of these businesses could intermix. You could have a fish farm and a catch-out facility and maybe sell bait on the side as well. So
right.
It's
Is that
really
something
tough.
You hope the inspection clarification is going to help you?
Yes, and then we're also working with our license division to add a simple survey when someone steps up to buy this license to ask what they're doing with the license. And hopefully over the next year we can maybe fine-tune that a little bit. They'd still be able to choose all three if they're doing all three, but we would have a better deal. This license also is bought by Academy Sports or Bass Pro Shop, anyone that's selling live or minnows or anything like that, so fish or aquatic species.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Could I ask if, when we bring back the information about the history of this rule, could we, in the meantime, file this rule, which tightens up what we're doing today? And if the commission considers it and wants to keep moving with it, we'd have that opportunity with this commission in February. If we push it off a month, we're going to be starting with new people and a new process, and we don't have the dates for that.
I'm actually comfortable with that with a caveat. I think there are going to be some potential changes to this and improvements, and so I would
We'll see how that goes, I guess. Yeah.
I would encourage that.
We would want to file one in the hopes that it would satisfy the commission's will. If you could always vote it down in February.
Yeah.
Or we could, is that fair, legal counsel? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner.
Back to the catfish. I'm a little confused here. You're talking about commercial fishermen. Can they go out and net catfish out of one of our rivers and take them to that pond and sell them to that guy?
They can, but they're under the same regulations as sport fishermen. Those fish have to be above 8 inches because we have a no live haul fish under 8 inches, or below the 34 inches. They cannot take a larger fish than 34 inches.
Well, I'm kind of like Bill. I mean, those fish were taken out of a river where somebody had to have a license to fish for that. And now we're allowing them to take them to somebody and make a profit off of those fish
Your commercial fishermen have to have a license, and your pay lake has to have a license. Those people that I do understand and
Hey, the license, did you say
$62 for resident,
All three of those.
$610 for a non-resident, and the non-resident really doesn't cover the catch-out facility. It's more the bait dealers and the fish farmers.
But it's $62 for resident.
Yes.
For all, be able to do all that.
Bill, are you wanting to do
I don't
something?
know whether we want to discuss it now or not, but I think that it needs to be discussed that people that fish in one of these pay lanes need to buy a license to fish.
Is that something you're gonna look into, Bobby? I mean,
We're gonna look into it, try to get. I think we'll look into it and try to get some history as to why we have it and what was the reason for it at one time. We may have to go back and speak with some former fisheries employees who are no longer working and
well,
been retired for a while.
The person, I mean, that commercial fisherman's going out there and taking that catfish where somebody had to buy a license to go out there and try to catch that same fish. And we're missing that person that's at the pay lake by doing that, I think.
Well, they also catch catfish and they sell them to a fish market to people who don't have to have a license. So, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. So
I got you.
I'd like to ask our general counsel to comment.
Thank you.
Would you introduce yourself? So
Tracy
the-
Boyers, General
Thank you.
Counsel. If you look at 70-2-221, which is the fish dealer's license requirements, that includes catch-out facilities. It states, fish to be purchased may be caught by persons using legal fishing methods without the requirement of a fishing license. So anything would have to be a legislative initiative.
So that would not be related to this proclamation. If we want to deal with it, we need to do it through another vehicle.
You would have to take it out of the law.
Okay? Does that make sense?
Oh, I understand, but it's a legislative issue and the legislative session's fixing to start,
Right.
so.
And just to make sure we're all on the same page, this proclamation is a separate matter from that process. They don't necessarily have to be conflated in the same issue. We can separate them. Does that work for you, Bill? I mean, because I'm hearing you that this is an issue.
I understand this.
It needs to be on the calendar next month. That's great, but we can pull it apart
Yeah.
if that's all right.
I don't think the license, that has anything to do with this. It's just a completely
Great.
separate issue.
Perfect. Commissioner Stroud?
Thank you, Bobby. When you're looking at this, the history of this stuff and all that, would you mind, if you don't mind, checking around the other states around us that have that very same situation, if they do, and if so, what their regulations and rules are? Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Just a point that I'm thinking why that would be that way. Pay lakes, usually somebody just fishes once a year, and they're bringing their family, and they're just wanting to go experience fishing. It may lead to them buying a license because they fall in love with it. So I can see the point of maybe not making them buy a license just to go fish one day to Pay Lake. You see, that's just my...
I think I'm not sure it's a true analogy, but another analogy would be for some of our WMAs that allow certain activities for certain clubs, and the clubs will pay a fee to utilize it for a certain purpose, but they don't require a hunting license for other things. I think we've got pretty consistent looseness to get folks engaged at a first step and require a license for that. I'm not sure that's a true analogy, but at least similar. So, any other questions on this? Perfect. Thank you very much for the presentation, and we'll look forward to its next iteration.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we've concluded our business.
Thank you, Chairman Woodson. Chairman Holbert, Commissioner Holbert, would like to be recognized.
Well, we were talking, and since Director Carter isn't here, we've got a question for, I guess it'd come to the Assistant Director, Wilson. Me and Mr. Chairman would like to know the difference between the Wami tilapia and the Mozambique tilapia.
They look very similar, but they're from different parts of the world.
Is one from Mozambique? Would one of them be from Mozambique, maybe? Is it?
There's also the Nile tilapia and the blue tilapia.
Right, we had that next.
Thank you for the clarification. I think that helped, didn't it? Yeah. Okay. I'd like to recognize Chairman Sanders for the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. All right, would like to call Tim Churchill to the podium, please.
There it is. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Sanders. I had two budget expansions for the current year. Typo on the slide, it's FY19, FY18 is passed. First one is for the Lone Oaks and 4-H youth project to fully fund that. The project was approved in the summer, but it was not, enough money wasn't put into the budget for it. So the request is for $218,245. There's no non-federal funds going into that.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met yesterday and recommend passage of this.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. I'll take that in the form of a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Cox. Any discussion from the commission?
I have one quick comment that if any of y'all were in a meeting of the R3 committee and we discussed just briefly, and I discussed it with Commissioner Woodson with her education efforts about designing a curriculum for schools about wildlife and hunting and how they relate and I talked to Ben West and he's excited about perhaps helping us start that or write that curriculum with one of these positions that we're helping to fund. So it's a good.
Great, thank you for that. Any other discussion from the commission? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, all in favor for the passage of the Lone Oak Youth Project budget expansion, let it know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes. Chairman Sanders?
Mr. Churchill.
I have one more budget expansion. It is, can you pull that back up? This one is for the payment in lieu of taxes for the TWRA lands. This request is for PR funds and wetland funds, $450,000. We will get 75% of the $450,000, which we have to pay every year anyway, returned to us and into our coffers. So.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the committee recommends passage after meeting yesterday.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. I take that in the form of a motion. I have a second. Second from Commissioner McLaren. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, all in favor for the pilot payment for TWRA lands, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, I got one question.
Sure.
It wasn't about that, so I didn't want to ask it during the motion, but when we approve, just say a shooting complex or a sporting clays range, do we require anything from that county or organization saying they will keep it open a certain amount of time? I guess if we build a $500,000 range, do we ask anything from them of keeping it open 12 months a year or 10 months? I've had some calls about one, and people want to shoot, and they're it's closed.
Right.
And that's my question is.
Yeah, it's the Fish and Wildlife Service, when they approve these things, want to make sure that it is open to the public a fair amount of time, and what that fair amount of time is, it's at least 50% of the time. And so they want all that stuff. We do a lot of documentation on what the obligations of the county or the city are to be able to do that.
Right. Okay. I just know if we build a rifle range to sight in rifles, it would be nice if it was open during or right before rifle hunting season. And
yes.
I'm getting the calls that they're not. So it bothers me, and I know they're don't belong to us anymore.
Well, that's a good point, and that's something
I think
we probably
we need
ought
to
to
really
put into our protocol.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Commissioner
Thank
Sanders?
you. I'd like to call Frank Fiss to the podium, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanders. We have two fisheries budget expansions, one for $50,000 for budget 7301. These funds were received from TVA, and they're for work at Normandy Hatchery.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met, and we recommend passage of expansion to budget 7301.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Take that in the form of a motion. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Stroud. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? All in favor of the budget expansion for the Normandy hatchery, please let me know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes.
Our second expansion request was for $25,800 to go to budget 7317, and this is for the brook trout genetics project, where some of these funds, $10,000 worth, was donated by Trout Unlimited.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee recommends expansion of budget 7317, and I move for passage.
And I take that in the form of a motion. And I have a second. Second from Commissioner Gardner. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, all in favor of the budget expansion for the, for this budget expansion, let me know by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes.
Thank you. Colonel Darren Ryder. You're hiding again.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanders. The Boating Law Enforcement Division requests to expand the agency's budget $829,700,000 for the Clean Vessel Act program. These monies are all 100% federal, no state dollars needed. The match is done through the grant recipient, and it's for the construction, renovation, and maintenance of pump-out stations at our marinas.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee recommends passage of the expansion to fiscal year 19 by $829,700.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That too taken for a motion. Second from Commissioner Swan. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, all in favor for the budget expansion for the clean restoration of the pump out stations, let anyone saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes.
Tim made that slide. That's his fault. You are correct, Commissioner. That should be FY19. I just blamed it on Tim, but actually it's my fault. Where'd he go?
Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you.
Ms. Upchurch.
The Biological Diversity Division has two budget expansion requests. I'm advancing like crazy here. Yeah, and the first one is for $792,164.50 for an expansion for 765000. All of these are 100% federal dollars from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They are for management conservation of species of greatest conservation need, endangered species. They are all to either prevent species from going on the endangered species list, for downlisting species, or trying to take species off of the endangered species list. So again, $792,164.50, budget expansion for 765000.
Mr. Chairman, the committee met and recommends expansion of $792,164.50.
Perfect. I'll take that in the form of a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Second from Commissioner Holbert. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, all in favor for the conservation needs projects, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, this passes.
May I ask a question about that right quick, please? Pandy, when you all get this money for this research, do you ever get any money to specifically work on habitat to help the species, or is this strictly just gathering data and information?
For these, most of them are, again, dealing with the endangered species list. In particular, say, for example, the Brawley's Fork crayfish in this particular expansion. That is a species, it's been petitioned by the Center for Biological Diversity to be added to the endangered species list. And what we're doing with $45,000 is going and doing on-the-ground, hard data research. And if we find that that species is in good shape, if the population is in good shape, then we will address the Center for Biological Diversity with our argument to try to get them to remove their petition. So a lot of this work is dealing with species that are on the endangered species list. Some of those, when we're looking at things like the laurel dace, we are looking at life history of those species. So one of these grants is to study a surrogate species such as the Tennessee dace, so that we can learn more about their life history and more about what they may need in order for us to propagate and reintroduce. So a lot of this money is in the form of actually raising these animals and making sure that they do have good habitat to put them back into. But a lot of it is about the species themselves, either in increasing their numbers, propagating them, reintroducing them, or learning more about them so that we can improve their habitat.
Commissioner Stroud?
If I may, I don't want to get in the weeds in this thing, but what's our most endangered species? What's the one in most endangered?
So right now, I would say our bats are the most endangered species, and probably our Indiana bats are our most endangered species. And again, you know, once upon a time, we would say, the loss of habitat is the #1 cause of wildlife population decline in the state. But now we can say disease is running neck and neck with habitat loss.
And then which species is the least endangered on our list?
On our list? On our...
Yeah, I'm just curious about this.
Right. So if we have a species on the threatened and endangered species list, it's automatically in decline.
Okay.
But we do have, so you'll see in this expansion, you'll see species of greatest conservation need. And so there's rungs of rarity. So if they are on considered a species of greatest conservation need, they are in our state wildlife action plan. And what we're doing is we're trying to address the initial decline of those species so that we can prevent them from even becoming deemed in need of management. So if we think a species is just starting to decline, say lark sparrow, loggerhead shrike, our grassland songbird species, we are already, that's when we start our habitat management, is early, so that we can, that's all this, the elk habitat, the fire and all that is improving habitat for our non-game songbirds as well, especially those grassland species that are declining. Yeah. All righty. And Commissioner Cox, I'm so glad you're here today. Because part of this money is for the monitoring of a species that we removed from the endangered species list.
Yeah.
We know because we do remove species from the endangered species list. The Nashville crayfish. So Tennessee is doing its job. We're working hard to remove species from the endangered species list. Very proud.
If it's removed, how much money do you spend to monitor it?
$11,000 a year for 5 years.
And then you quit spending money on it.
And then we say it's good.
Bill, we're glad you're here too. So, any other comments from the commission? Any comments from the commission? Any comments from the public? So all in favor for this budget expansion? Oh, we already done it? Okay.
I didn't start speaking until you passed it.
Okay.
I'm not crazy.
We especially want to pass this one, so.
All right, the next one, please.
And the next biological diversity budget expansion is for budget 764700 for fiscal year 19. And it is for an expansion of $30,000. This is a Region 2, Middle Tennessee, bat work on white nose syndrome, and this is a result of applying for and getting a grant of $30,000 for research on white nose syndrome by the Region 2 staff.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met and recommend passage of this expansion to 7647 by $30,000.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. I take that in the form of a motion. If I could pause just a second. Commissioner King, being that this is your birthday, would like for you to second this motion, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. Second from Commissioner King, and happy birthday. Commissioner Woods?
Before we do leave, could you blow the candles out?
How do I, Bill? Yeah. I'll figure I'll do that in a little while. Yeah, so any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? All in favor of the passage of budget expansion for the white nose bat survey, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we don't have Brad Miller. He didn't want to come back.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here for Dr. Brad Miller. The Wildlife Division has one budget expansion request for $731,600 to take the raffle tag, the elk raffle tag funding, and leverage 75% PR money. And there's about 5 or 6 projects listed there that the funds will go to incorporate.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met and recommends expansion of the North Cumberland WMA Habitat Project by $731,600.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. Take that in the form of a motion. Do I have a second? Second from Commissioner King. Again, thank you. Thank you. Any discussion from the commission?
I'd like to highlight Commissioner Holbert. This money is a result of his idea, and he pushed it, and it was a great idea, and good job.
Absolutely, I second that. We discussed that yesterday as well. What we used to get $13,000 for a year is now turned into this, so it's a wonderful. Yeah. So, any other discussion from the commission? Any others? Okay.
Conclude your action.
Okay. Any discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? All in favor for the budget expansion for North Cumberland WMA Habitat Projects, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Chris?
I just wanted to let the commission know that we have put the competitive process out for the raffle for next year. The tag has been again awarded to the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Foundation, and there's some pretty exciting things that they've already secured by ways of additional prizes to go into that raffle, including a Polaris side-by-side, and they're really stepping up the game this year. So we fully hope to not only achieve what we did this past year, but also hopefully build on that next year.
Great news. Thank you. Commissioner Sanders?
I'd like to call Ken Tarkington to the podium, please.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. I appreciate your comments earlier about December 7th, 1941, what we call Pearl Harbor Day. As of about a year ago, the Veterans Administration identified that there's about 1,000 World War II veterans that pass away every day. I would encourage any of you who can to, if you have the opportunity, to engage those folks that are still with us and thank them for their service, and maybe try to get them to talk about their service. It can be a therapeutic forum, and you might just learn something. Also, there's several folks that are from the agency that are serving in military uniform today, and several of those are deployed overseas and won't be at home with their families for the holidays, so we might keep them in our minds as we go through the holiday season. Thank you for letting me say that. There's a 3-page report on your iPads. I'm reporting through the month of September.
Ken, just,
Sir.
and it's also in the last of section 6 of your book. Go ahead, Ken.
The top of the page, first page, is the boating fund, and we're approximately 29% ahead of where we were at this point in time last year in revenues. On the expense side, we've expended about 16% of the annual allotment. In the middle of the page, the wildlife fund, we're approximately 9.5% ahead of collections of our projection for this year, while expending approximately 16% of the allotment for the year. At the bottom of the page, on the endowments, we have watchable endowment has approximately $6.5 million balance, and we have about $6,200 that we can transfer at some point to the wildlife fund. On the lifetime sportsman, there's a little over $52 million balance in that fund. On the next page, the Wetlands Acquisition, we have a balance of $10.8 million. We've zeroed the maintenance out, as we usually do in that account. And the compensation, which is the in lieu of tax, has approximately $429,000, and those tax payments actually won't be paid until probably the May or June timeframe. The final sheet is the investment. Now, the investment I have through October, the earnings or the valuation of it, excuse me, we had a slight decrease for the month, 0.14%, but since inception, we're at approximately 1.75%. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Would you back up to boating and explain, please, sir? We've been concerned about boating registrations, and all of a sudden we got 217% year-over-year increase. So and we're 29% up. So what happened?
Well, I would probably relay that to our license folks. They may have an idea. In general, what I've seen in numbers, and I don't know of all the numbers of boats registered, but new boats and renewals are up. New boats and transfers are up considerably, but renewals are down considerably. So does that say that the people who are registering new boats and transferring theirs or selling them to somebody else is doing that at a higher financial rate? I don't know. Susie here, do you have any?
Part of that can be attested to auto-renew, but I think there were some transfers that possibly could have taken place in July and August that did not take place until September that allotted for such a large increase.
Ken, does this have anything to do with when the state audited our books? There was, I believe, boating. There was we had much more in the budget than we realized. Does this have anything to do with that?
I think that was in reference to federal aid, to the federal reporting. This is straight or strict boat registrations, or the dollars for those boat registrations. So I think they're two separate items.
Here's a concern I have. We're having discussions about raising the registration fee for boats based on appears to be erroneous information, and it's concerning to me that we are concerned that we're not making enough money, and all of a sudden, miraculously, we're 30% over previous year. So, what's going on? Anybody? I don't understand. That doesn't.
Commissioner Cox, I would just caution that there are some accounting things that probably go into reflecting the 217% increase in September. That's also just reflecting 3 months worth of revenue. I think the overall status of the boating fund and what we've seen over the past few years when comparing apples to apples on collections. We've experienced a loss of revenue, or at the very least an increase in expenses associated with inflation or other things that put the boating fund somewhat out of balance. So I wouldn't read too much into the percentage increase based on 3 months of collection. That certainly could balance out over the year. It just has a lot to do with when those renewals come up. Also has a lot to do with whether somebody had purchased a registration for 1, 2, or 3 years. We may be getting several in, but over time, what we've seen, and the reason we've been discussing an increase to the boat registration fees, has to do more with the expenses and the income that we've viewed for more than just a 3-month period, which is being reflected here. So,
and I appreciate that, but I'd like to know where that money came from. If a Brant has started marketing and getting 3-year renewals, good explanation. I mean, that could be it. But all of a sudden to have losses for 2 or 3 years, and now we're 30% up, and I know it's only 3 months, but you know, that's 217%. It just doesn't, I mean, obviously we don't know exactly what happened, so you're just guessing. So
I can tell you that the proposal on the fee increases for boat registrations to bring us into compliance with the CPI will be before you in January, and I'll be prepared to discuss all of those issues with more detail at that time.
All right, I have one more thing, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask the agency to contact, and this is just from me, so without objection, I suppose, or the chair, to talk to the treasurer about our investment account. And right now it's down, the markets are down, et cetera, and a good time to get out of it, if we want to get out of it, what the interest rate could be, and the other options, because I don't think this is working the way it was supposed to. And we talked about this a couple months ago, but I would ask that you contact the treasurer, talk to him, get some ideas, find out what he thinks, and let's make a decision on whether we want to leave it in here or not. And perhaps we're making enough interest on whatever the original account was that it would help the operating budget, since it's not doing it now.
Which chairman is that, you or me?
Either one.
Okay. I'm fine with that, and we can definitely contact the treasurer. Ken, if you could take care of reaching out to them, and so we can figure out and be able to discuss our options at the next meeting.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions?
And isn't that a legislative issue as well? Is that correct? We're limited to what we can do.
I apologize, I missed the question.
Just talking about what to do with the reserve.
I think we are limited, but there are some options within that limitation.
I don't think we have legislation to move the money from one vehicle to another.
What I understand.
Take legislation to do that.
Excuse me, what I understood that you wanted to do was to see what we could do to take it out of the investment and put it perhaps back in SPIF.
See what the interest rates are, see what he recommends, because we're not,
Okay.
I think the purpose was to try to get the agency at once or twice or 3 times a year, get money for the operating budget in a higher producing fund.
Okay.
It's obviously not doing that. I don't know that we've gotten any money out of it at all. So it may be the interest rate's up enough that SPIF account might be better for what we needed to do. So I think you ought to call and ask their office what they suggest.
We'll do it. Any other questions, comments?
Reference the lifetime sportsman endowment. Can you tell me what the difference between the endowment number on, there's a $52 million number on the endowment, and then there's a $44 million number on page 3. That's associated with lifetime sportsmen. Are those 2 separate accounts, or can you tell me what the difference is between those 2?
Sure. The investment account at the inception in October 15th of maybe 2015, whenever we first participated,
in the investment with the treasurer, there was an amount transferred to them of $44 million even of what the balance was at that time. The balance today of the whole fund of the lifetime account is at $52 million. So we have $44 million invested of the $52 million balance that we have.
Okay.
What's the interest rate on certificate?
2.18. That was last month. I mean, we can discuss this later, but at the outset, the Treasury told us that if we participated in this, it was for the long run. Doesn't mean we cannot pull out of it at some point, but they had advised not doing it until such time we could give them several months' notice so they could try to look at the market fluctuation to see what they thought would be the best time for us to do that. And this may be the time to do it, although bonds have gone down just like the stock market has. And I think that's principally what they have invested in. But I'll certainly either get with them or the director get with them and see what they recommend.
Thank you. Any other questions for Ken? All right, Mr. Chairman, 8 budget expansions and a financial report in 30 minutes and 58 seconds. It's back to you.
Great job. You had a decimal point there, too. So
And a
great.
decimal point.
Yeah, great. Well, and this is maybe the quickest meeting we've had. Be prepared. The next two are going to be pretty busy. We have a lot of issues, so we'll make up for today. But I'd like to tell everyone in the agency how much we appreciate all that you do and your dedication to this agency and how blessed we are to be a part of this organization. And I want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year. And I hope everyone has a great time with their family. So any other comments from the commission?
I just have one. When do we come back here? February? Can we get the battery put in that clock up there? It's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Woods?
As far as I can figure, it's time for her to blow the candles out.
Yeah, there. Anyone else? Any other comments? Bobby? Anyone? Great. We all have a Merry Christmas and thank you.
I don't think I got enough bread.